Access more.
Well, hello, this is Levi.
And this is Jennie. And we are
the Luskos.
Hey, it's the Luskos.
No, we are not.
Oh.
Hey, it's the Luskos. We're just the regular Luskos.
We are the Luskos.
Wow, I just hit my nose on the mic. I was like, I almost headbutted it. You can't act as animated in the microphone in front of you as you can just in regular
But
life.
luckily it's soft. So if you did headbutt it, it would not
unless
hurt
you headbutted it vigorously.
That would be very vigorous.
Ultra vigorously. Well, hello, and thank you for listening. This is season 2. It is the month of March. Jennie, how are you?
I'm doing so good. I'm drinking this tea that's my favorite in all the land. And I am with my love.
Ooh, spicy. Hey, it might not be March. You might be listening to this months from now or even years from now. And you're like, it's not March. It's just March where we are.
Yeah.
And we
where
are
you
really
we are.
glad to welcome you to the podcast. Every once in a while, I do have to throw out that it is a great privilege for us to be a part of your lives. So thank you for inviting and making space enough in your heart. Let me tell you, this podcast is one that you need to finish to the end.
To the end.
To the bitter, sweet end.
To the bitter, beautiful end.
There's actually no bitter
There's
end.
no bitter.
It's just the sweet end. Because today we present for your consideration what may be, in my opinion, one of the most precious, powerful, important episodes of this podcast so far.
Yeah.
Because we get to introduce you personally. You have for sure know the name. It's a household name. But to someone who I guarantee you, in listening to him speak, is going to challenge and inspire you and cause you maybe to rethink the definition of what the paradigm called success looks like. Because we live in a culture where, Jennie, tell me if you agree to this, where it's kind of like, man, I just got to get rich or get famous or whatever to get $1 million by the time I'm 30 so I can retire ASAP. And kind of the whole thing about work is a barrier to being retired. And we see that almost as, thank you, is almost like the end. And the carrot is retire. Then you can do what? Exactly. And we're going to introduce you to someone who has just written a book called Forward that's basically all about always living with a cause, always living with a dream, always charging into your tomorrow, full of faith and ready for what's next.
Yeah. No, you're going to, I'm saying now that you are going to be challenged and inspired, and because that's exactly how we both feel.
Yeah, we had the chance to sit down and have a conversation with someone who is pretty well on the Christian Mount Rushmore as far as communicators, authors. Dr. David Jeremiah is who I'm talking about. He leads Shadow Mountain Church in, I think it's El Cajon, but basically San Diego, California is where it's at. And he has written so many books. His radio show, Turning Point, has been heard around the world for years and is one of just the most awarded radio teaching shows. He's on TV, of course. You're going to hear him get into that. This guy, I was exhausted by the end of the conversation. Like, oh my gosh, there's so much drive. I consider myself type A and driven. This is a whole different level of that.
I feel like this it's like, I felt like I was talking to you when you're older.
79. Yeah.
Seasoned.
Wow. Beautiful. Well, I'm getting there. I'm working on it. But I really feel, even as we were having the conversation, I was like, man, I cannot wait for our podcast family to listen to this.
So good.
To treat, you've heard him preach, you've heard him, this is a chance to, like we were sitting down to have tea with him just to talk and ask about daily routines, life in quarantine, what is the secret to 57 years of marriage, and he gets there by the end. So you have to, he says a random little thing that I think is probably one of the keys to marriage. So, dang. Well, this is one of those, if you have ears to hear, because listening to this message, you could
listen in, lean in.
You could very well invest this and turn it into something great and see some ROI on it, or it could just be another podcast. But I dare you to believe
it's not just another podcast.
No, I'm saying it's going to be what they choose to take.
I'm just kind of like supporting what you just said.
It's either going to be just another podcast or a life-changing paradigm and some challenging thoughts to really rethink how you approach everything. So come on now. Get on that horse
ma'am.
and get on that horse and ride. This is a conversation with our friend, Dr. David Jeremiah. Well, Dr. David Jeremiah, thank you for coming on Hey, It's the Luskos.
It's good. It's good to be where I am and look at you and realize where you are.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we were just
so
talking.
thankful.
We were just talking before we started about how it's 88 in San Diego, and I think the high was 21 today in Montana.
Oh my goodness.
All things being equal, I think you got the better end of the stick. So I'm expecting better accommodations in heaven. That's all I'm saying.
Oh,
Well, somebody once told me that San Diego is the vestibule to heaven, so I don't know if that's true or not.
Wow. Well, you know what? It really is. You guys are in a beautiful spot. How many years have you lived in San Diego?
We moved here, Levi, in 1981, so we've been here 40 years or so. Yeah.
And is it true you grew up in Ohio? Is that right?
I was born in Toledo, Ohio. My father pastored a church in Dayton, Ohio. And then my dad became the president of Cedarville College in Cedarville, Ohio, and he was the president and chancellor there for 50 years.
Okay.
So I kind of grew up in that little village in Cedarville.
Well, I think you'll be proud of me. I quoted in my sermon for this Sunday, Coach Woody Hayes. He's kind of Ohio royalty, isn't he? The 3 yards and a cloud of dust.
Yep, I remember him. In fact, I actually watched him when he had his major issue that he had. Remember, he got mad and grabbed hold of somebody or something. I forget what it was, but he lost it for a little bit, and you don't get to do that when you're on television. So
well, but Buzz Aldrin kind of got away with it.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
right.
But you know what? Yeah, I can't
And then
imagine
there's
it.
Bobby Knight.
That's true. But being as public as those people are, dealing with the level of intensity of fame, that has just got to be challenging.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Sure. And everybody kind of especially with football. I mean, people just second guess your every decision and every.
gosh.
But that's ministry too. It's challenging, and you've been in it for a long time. I understand you got your start in youth ministry. You're a youth pastor, is that right?
Yeah. When I graduated from Dallas Seminary, Don and I moved to Haddon Heights, New Jersey. And I was the youth pastor and Christian ed director at the Haddon Heights Baptist Church for 2 years. That's my first step into the ministry.
Wow.
Wow. And how long did you guys, were you married at that point?
Yeah, we came out of seminary. Actually, we both graduated from Cedarville College and got married the next June, and then went to Dallas Seminary after we got married. And I went there and was there for 4 years. Then our first ministry assignment after that was to go to New Jersey, and I was a youth pastor. It was fun. I loved every minute of it.
To New Jersey. Wow.
What do you remember from those days of serving students? I mean, obviously, kids are dealing with different stuff in different times, but I mean, your recollection of that period of life.
Well, for one thing, we had a Bible study on Wednesday nights, and we had like 300 kids came to this Bible study, and they weren't from our church. They came from everywhere. And then I think after the first summer we got into the fall, I started a basketball league in South Jersey, and it was like church teams, and it ran all day Saturday. We had a gym. And we started like at 7 o'clock in the morning and ran until 8 o'clock at night. We had girls basketball and boys basketball. I coached the teams, and we had so much fun. And so many of those kids that played way back then who are, getting older now, they write me and tell me that those were some of their best days, and they really were cool.
Wow.
That's incredible.
So beautiful.
And did you see throughout, I mean, I read about your call to ministry and you reaching out to Dr. Gromacki and him kind of being a mentor to you. I love his commentaries, by the way. He's one of my, if he has a New Testament commentary on a book, I want it because he does just such a great job. How did you come into contact with him?
Well, he was I had him for Bible at Cedarville College. He was one of my professors. And I just remembered when I went there, some of the professors were older and kind of frumpy. He showed up and he looked like, off the GQ, he looked really cool. And I was really impressed with this guy. And then I found out that he had recently graduated from Dallas Seminary he got his doctor's degree. and we became friends. I learned so much from him. Interestingly enough, I actually bought his old car. He had a 1954 Chevy, and I'd never had a car, and I bought his car.
Wow.
And so he was a real good influence in my life.
And you talked to him and just said, I feel this call to ministry. I feel this call to preaching specifically. What age would you have been at that point?
Well, I was a senior in college. I had no thought I would go into the ministry. I was working at a couple of radio stations. I was a disc jockey at WEEC.
You do have that disc jockey voice, though.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's where I learned radio doing that. Doing the 3 to I worked from 3 to 11. I did the news and the weather and request shows. I mean, you didn't have many people working in those stations. You just need somebody to keep it going, and that's what I did. And that's where I learned radio doing that.
And now your voice is heard all around the world on the radio. What a funny thing that the seeds even then could be kind of seen there.
Well, you know what, Levi? One of the things when God called me to preach, that I was so certain this is what he wanted me to do. But I was really bummed because I loved radio. I mean, I not only loved the front side of the mic. When I was growing up, I used to do Allied Heath kits and make radios and stuff. I mean, I loved the whole business. And I thought, hey, I'm going to go do what God wants me to do. But man, I'm going to miss radio. And, I was on one station, and we are now on 3,000 radio stations in America.
Oh, gosh.
And most of them were on 2 or 3 times. And so I've often thought God was up there kind of laughing because he's saying, look, you want to follow me? I'll work this for you. But, you can have one or you can have 3,000.
He's like, just wait, there's more.
When you put God, when you trust God, it was almost like he didn't call me to the ministry so he could take radio away from me. He called it so he could expand it and make it everything that I could ever have hoped it would be. And I've seen that happen so many times in my life, as I know you guys have too.
Dr. Jeremiah, there's probably a lot of people listening right now who maybe either can relate to you in that they're in a season of life where they have something in their heart they're beginning to sense God doing, or they feel like God is taking something away like that. And they feel like to follow God is to walk away from some great opportunity. But it seems to me like you're saying that it's the exact opposite, that to follow God, even if it seems like he's taking you away from something, it's far better than it could be in your own strength.
You have to be willing to say no to the things that you think you need to do before God can say yes to what he wants you to do. Wow. I remember John Maxwell once told me, he was a pastor here in Fort Wayne when I first came, or in San Diego when I first came here. And one of his famous statements was, before you can go up, you have to go down. Before you can be exalted, you have to humble yourself before the Lord. And if he says, hey, you're not going to be on the radio, you're going to seminary for 4 years. And when I get done with you, then we'll talk.
Wow.
That's kind of how it was.
So were those years kind of a Paul in the desert kind of a period for you?
They were hard, first of all, because Don and I had just gotten married. We were both working. I was working a full-time job in a freight company, and she was working at Blue Cross. And we worked hard. We still laugh about it. Our first little apartment had a Murphy bed in it.
Oh yeah.
One of those you pull down out of the wall. So if somebody comes to visit you, got to get up and get dressed and put the bed away so you can go to the door. I mean,
that was your bed.
Yeah.
Your bed was, I thought you were saying the Murphy bed was the guest bedroom.
No, we had it was kind of like a 1-room apartment, and the Murphy bed was right front and center.
Wow. But that's an important phase. And I imagine looking back, you smile when you think about that era. It's not like, oh, we can't believe we survived it, but more fun than that, right?
It's amazing to me that you remember so many individual personal things of stuff like that. I mean, I used to walk to the seminary because our apartment was real close, and there was a Waffle House between where we lived, and I always stop in there and get some coffee. And of course, now if you go south, there's Waffle Houses everywhere, but I'd never seen a Waffle House before, and that was right on the corner before you went to the campus. I'd go in there, and I didn't eat many waffles because I wasn't into it that much, but I had my coffee, and that seems like that was in a different lifetime.
Wow. Well, and you and your wife have been married 57 years?
Yes.
Wow.
Hey, let me tell you something.
Congratulations.
Newsflash. I'm going to be 80 next week.
Hey, come on. Well, early
Oh.
congratulations. And by the
Wow.
time people are listening to this on our podcast, it will already have happened. So we can say happy
Right.
birthday.
Happy birthday.
80 years
Thank you very much.
Wow.
And a life well lived and a
Yeah.
life that's just beginning. Your influence just
Yeah.
continuing to expand, more relevant than ever.
Yeah.
We will talk about it in a little bit, but this new book that I'm holding, those who are watching on video can see Forward, your brand new release out of many, many books. Goodness gracious. How many books have you written in your life?
I don't know, 50 some or something. I'm not sure.
Just 50 some. We'll come back to that. My gosh, you also have an amazing study Bible that I want people to know about as a great resource. I get asked all the time, I love reading the Bible, but I don't know where to take it next. And I always tell people, grab a study Bible. And I've pointed so many people to yours. And, it's just a resource where you can just look down at footnotes, see cross references. Great. It gives some historical context out. And I do want to come back to that. But this book, Discovering God's Presence and Purpose in Your Tomorrow, is really a message that to me is all the more important because of the fact that you're turning 80. And yet you're full of faith, full of vision. Honestly, and this is a little bit just my over being a little bit emotional as I read it because the references there's so much from pop culture and you're referencing this and that. I mean, it is such a current, such a now message, such a needed message in a time when so many people feel stuck, feel hopeless, feel like whether it's economically or socially or politically, that just the best days are behind them and there's no sense even dreaming. Because what's the point? I hear people say all the time, I don't even know if I want to have kids because why bring kids into this world? It's like, but you're calling us to look forward, to be full of faith, bright-eyed with optimism. It's a very important message.
Amazing.
My favorite image of that book is the idea that when you get in the car, the windshield is huge, but the rear view mirror is very little. And so as you go through life, you got to look forward. You got to see what's behind you so it can inform you, but it can't control you. And that's where so many, right now, COVID-19, all of the economic stress and everything people are going through, it's controlling them.
Yeah.
And what's really sad, and I know you guys are in a different situation than we are, it's controlling so many churches too. And so people are stuck and they don't know what to do. And they don't know if, I hear people say, it's never going to be the way it used to be ever again. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's going to be better.
There you go.
Come on.
Maybe God has taken us through this. And, we just went through an election. I know it made a lot of people unhappy. But what I've observed about the church, Levi, is that the church flourishes better in times of adversity than it does in times of prosperity. And we're about to find out if that's true or not. Because we're going to go through some tough times. We don't have a lot of friends hovering around us saying, yay, boys, go get it. We have a lot of people talking about deprogramming us and taking us out of the game and not even listening to our voice. And so I'm really excited because I believe God is up to something. And I think the church is going to be at the center of it. I really do.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a very important word.
Yeah, I believe that.
We have a lot of friends in our 30s that don't have it, the energy, the appetite, the hunger and zeal and zest for life that you do. A lot of young people don't have, because I think there really is a sense of kind of fatalism that can kind of set in and even following God. Oh, what it is, and kind of a misconstrued idea of what the sovereignty of God should lead to. But you have drive not only as an evangelist and as a pastor and as a communicator, but as a human being. I mean, when I talk to you, it's about the bike ride you just had and this great restaurant. There's a hunger for life. Where does that come from for you? Is it just your personality, or did you come across that at some point?
I think I've always had that to some degree, Levi. But 20 some years ago, I went through lymphoma cancer. I had cancer really bad. I was stage 4.
Wow.
And I didn't know if I was going to make it. And life became such a precious thing to me that I just felt like, Lord, if you bring me through this, I'm never wasting a day.
Wow.
You bless me while I work so hard. And I say, what, God didn't give me my life back, so I go sit on a beach somewhere.
There you go.
Come on.
He gave me my life back so that I could live it. And, at the same time, I found that you can do that and still have a lot of fun and still enjoy what you do. I mean, we do cruises. We've been doing cruises forever. You got to come on a cruise with us sometimes. It's the greatest way to spend.
We'll be there. We'll be there. Tell us when.
Anyway, you pack everything, you unpack once, and your hotel floats around behind you. But
Love it.
we usually do one right after Christmas. We've been doing it for years. We go down to the Caribbean and take 400 or 500 people with us, and it was kind of like how you got over Christmas. Is you went on this cruise and kind of unwound.
Wow.
Well, you can't do anything this year. You can't go no cruises. So we found this hotel in Boca Raton, and we took off for Boca Raton and went to Florida. And in Florida, they don't even know there's anything going on down there.
They've never heard of a pandemic at the moment.
No,
They
it's
don't
like,
even know,
wow, yeah.
It's
a bit how it is in Montana too.
Had such a great time. And I think what I've learned is my wife and I have a little joke between us. She knows I'm never going to retire, but every once in a while we pretend we're retired.
I love it.
Then we go do something like retired people would do, but then we come back to the real world and do what we do. So,
well, some people, it's been said, they die at 40, but the burial doesn't happen till much later.
Absolutely. I think you may have said that in one of your books or something.
I don't want to quote myself, but
yeah, you die before
Someone once said.
Yeah, right. You die before and I know a lot of people like that. I know a lot of people.
But that's partially because of a culture that praises the idea of if I work hard enough, long enough, I can, get $1 million in the bank and then hopefully as soon as possible retire. And for our generation and younger, the dream is hit it big early, millionaire by 30, whatever. But really what you're saying is that's a kind of death prematurely that's going to keep you. And in this book, you're talking about the kind of premature burial of dreams that's going to keep you from having the kind of vitality that God wants for you.
Most people are surprised when I tell them that the word retirement's only in the Bible one time. It's in the book of Leviticus, where the Levites are told that when they turn 55, they have to walk away from it, but they can't completely walk away from it. They have to mentor the guys under them. So it's not really a total, but that's the closest thing to retirement there is in the Bible. We made retirement up back during the Social Security age. And now it's like it's part of the law of life. You got to retire. In fact, you probably remember this, but one of the things I had so much fun doing in this book, and I did it with tongue in cheek, I made a list of all the cool things I have gotten to do since I was supposed to retire.
That's great.
Wow.
Yeah.
And all the places I got to go, the things God has allowed me to do. I mean, it's just incredible. We sell ourselves short. Now, I know it's not all, we've had a little crisis here. My wife had a little, had a stent put in one of her arteries last week. And it was pretty emotional because she didn't have a heart attack, but she did have some pain. And we realized we're not 30, we're 80. And yet we had a follow-up today and we were talking about it on the way home, how blessed we are to have this life and how wonderful it is to be healthy enough to enjoy it and to enjoy our kids and our grandkids and I preach every week.
Wow.
I tell people say, well, somebody asked me, why did you preach after that when that happened to your wife? I said, because if I hadn't preached, they thought I'd had COVID. Then I'd have to answer all those letters. I'm not going to do that.
That's hilarious. Well, and we're living in a time when everyone's making a big deal about the fact that we elected our first female vice president, which is amazing that we live in a country where where that has happened, that glass ceiling has been broken. Yeah. Politics aside, that is something to celebrate, as a father of little girls, amazing. Sure. But I also think it's really cool that we have a 78-year-old commander-in-chief and to think about the ageism that can at times creep in and a different way of thinking about age. And like what you're saying is, now some people, their medical situation may dictate that they cannot continue doing, you couldn't still be doing your freight job perhaps, right? So some people may walk away from a career or technically retire, but that should be viewed almost as being opened up to even more kingdom influence than ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I labored really hard. There's a whole chapter in that book on, it's called Finish, how to finish. And I think I worked harder on that chapter than any other, probably because it was more appropriate for me than any of the other chapters, just to think about where I am in life. And I'll be honest with you, both of you, I don't know too many people that retire that end up being real happy. I have a lot of buddies of mine. I had one guy who loved to preach, but he hated administration. I heard he was retiring, and I called him up on the phone. He didn't even say hello. He said, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. And he was talking about not having to do the work of pastoring. And I met him not long ago and saw him, and I mean, he looked way older than he is, and he just was so unhappy. You know, I get up every day and I'm filled with joy, and I go and do what God calls me to do. There's new adventures all the time. You never know. For instance, last week we were talking about how some of the networks are ganging up on the other networks. Like, you know, right now the political police don't think there should be but one viewpoint in this world, and that's theirs.
Right.
So,
which is kind of the irony of a statement like the celebration of unity.
Yeah,
right. So long as it's our unity, is
but the problem is, you know, there should be, all voices should be speaking into these things. So
exactly.
Anyway, there's a new TV station called Newsmax. It's not new, but it's there, and it's really hot, and we sometimes watch it. So I called the guy that buys airtime for me, and I said, hey, I want to be the first evangelical on Newsmax. He goes, what? I said, I don't know if they even sell time to religious people, but put me on there. So we're on Newsmax now.
Beautiful.
Wow.
And I'm trying to get into the secular communities. So we just bought Monday through Friday on the History Channel. Every now in the morning at 6:30 or something, you get up, and if you find the History Channel, which is on every TV network, we're the 6:30 thing every day.
Incredible.
Wow.
So there's so much that needs to be done, and so many people that need to hear the gospel and hear the word of God. How can we sit on our hands, man? We got to get after it. We got to go do it.
That's that drive. That's that amazing message in this book, Forward.
Powerful.
I mean, you have chapters on focus, finish. You mentioned the finish chapter, dream, pursue, believe, invest, celebrate. I love the celebrate chapter.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the hardest right was finish. What was your favorite? Do you have a pet chapter that was like, man, that one really just kind of wrote itself?
Well, you know, it's probably like you. Everybody asks you what's your favorite book. It's the one you're working on or the one that just came out.
Of course.
Right.
But I love the dream chapter because I learned a lot about that. And I think maybe if I had to pick one that's favorite, there's a chapter in there that's just pretty much about biblical optimism.
Yes, that's a great chapter. Yeah.
I grew up in kind of a negative situation where people knew more about what we were against than they knew about what we were for. I had to kind of recover through that, push through that as I got older.
We had a similar
upbringing. I found out that there is a huge body of truth about being positive in the Christian life. Paul, who went through the most arduous lifestyle you can ever imagine, everywhere he went, he was in the synagogue or he was in prison, and almost all the time, both places. And he's the one who said, after listing 11 things, I think, in his list that we go through, he said, yet in all these things, we are more than conquerors. And the little word more than conquerors is a word in which the word Nike appears, which
there you go.
Turned my brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he didn't say we're just conquerors. He said, no, and all these things, and I mean, that's a pretty daunting list.
Yeah.
And all these things, he said, we are more than conquerors.
Yeah.
I want to be that kind of person.
Yes.
I don't want to be overwhelmed by life. I want to be overcoming life and doing that.
Amazing. Well, what's so beautiful is that you're living that out, and you're living that legacy for your family, for your church, but also for all of us who get the joy of reading what you write, and getting to listen to you right now is just so inspiring and challenging and strengthening my faith. And I want the same thing. I don't want to just check out. I want to continue to fight for what God has for us and live that more than conqueror's life. It's so helpful.
When Jennie and I were first married, she used to say, and she still says it here and there, that when she becomes older, she wants to have smile lines, not frown lines. And so she was always saying, I know I have to smile more, so I get smile lines and not frown lines. And what you're kind of saying is, spiritually speaking, to have spiritual smile lines and to not have that dowdy, frowny, the kids these days are lazy, everything's going to hell in a handbag, and, kind of that kind of grumpy old man spirituality, which is oftentimes sadly linked up with the pious religious caricature.
You know that during the COVID, you people cover up their mouth, but I found out you smile with your eyes.
Ooh.
Come on.
And so I've actually had fun doing that. People have a mask on. I say, "Oh, I love your smile." You can't see my smile. Oh, yes, I can. I can see it in your eyes. And there's actually a word for that. If you look it up, there's a name somebody gave to that. And the eye smile is way more powerful than the lip smile.
Yes, the smize. Don't they call it the smize?
Yeah, there's a term for it. It's in the book, but I can't remember what the name of it is. But it's a special word for the smile with your eyes.
Beautiful.
And it's so interesting to see people and realize that they can cover up their mouth with their mask, but they can't cover up the joy of the Lord in their heart.
Come on.
Comes through their eyes.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so when you remember back, you're in that conversation, you're a young man, starting to feel that call to ministry, and Dr. Gromek, you said he helped kind of map out what you should be doing and focusing in on. What do you remember as far as of the advice he gave you that maybe even a generation of young men and women hearing the voice of your voice today could say, hey, these were some things that really helped me as I began to...
Well, I wouldn't have been talking to him if I hadn't wanted to find how to preach the Bible, because I didn't know how to do that. I had taken courses in public speaking, but I wanted to learn how to preach the Bible, because when he taught classes, that's what he exposed the scripture. He would tell us what it means, and it was practical. And so, apart from helping me get accepted at Dallas Seminary, I think we had some conversations about other things too. One of the things that's always interesting to me is somebody will come to me and say, I think God's called me to preach. And so I say, well, where are you preaching?
Yeah.
Well, not right now, but no. If God's called you to preach, you're going to preach somewhere.
Right.
You're going to go to the jail. You're going to preach for the youth. And that's a pretty good barometer on whether you really got the disease or not. Because Paul said, woe is me if I don't preach the gospel.
Wow.
That's
Jeremiah
what happened to me.
Something similar.
So I was preaching every week. Don and I were driving to Columbus, Ohio, and I was preaching in a little country church that had like 35 people in it. And I went there for 2 years, or for a year and a half while we were still finishing up seminary. That was our weekend thing. We went to the Fairfield Baptist Church in Thurston, Ohio. And I'll tell you how back in the country it was. There was a cemetery in the backyard. It had a cemetery behind it. That's kind of the way you can tell. And I'll never forget that. And I was working on how to do sermons. I didn't know very much about it, but I was learning. And, if God has called you to preach, if it's truly a calling, you'll find a way to do it.
Yeah.
And you won't be able to handle, okay, I'm going to go to school and like 5 years from now, I'm going to start preaching. It doesn't work that way, at least in my estimation.
No, it's David out in the fields. God knew where he was to come get him and find him when he wanted him, right?
Absolutely. So, and I have to tell you guys, one of the reasons I so admire you and why I'm here talking to you today, so many of the guys who are where you are in life are not committed to the scripture. They may say they are, but I've heard you and I know what your heart is. You preach the Bible.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure what this means. You don't come off as some woke guy who's caught up in all the issues and forgot what you're supposed to do. Wow. We need to teach the scripture. And I'm more convinced than, when this whole thing happened in the Capitol, I mean, everybody looks to you. I'm not sure what happened to you, but I got up in the pulpit and I knew everybody wanted me to say something about what happened in the Capitol. And here's what I said. I said, folks, I know you want me to say something. I only got one thing to say. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand.
Amen.
Let's get on with the service.
Come on.
There you go.
We need to preach the gospel
yeah.
more than ever before. And we don't have to go off on all these rabbit trails. I mean, I've read enough stuff about that my head's spinning. And if you're not careful, you get caught up in trying to answer questions and you don't ever give the answers.
Yeah.
The answer is the word of God. And Levi, don't you ever stop doing that, man, because what you do is you do it differently than I do because you're in a different generation. But when I was ordained, my father gave me this verse, Acts 13:36. It said, and David and David lived the will of God for his generation. That's all. And what you're doing is for your generation, and God is honoring it. And you have followers everywhere. When I ever say your name, oh yeah, I know Levi, or yeah, he's written this book, or whatever. And when people ask me, who are the young guys coming up in the faith who really treasure the Word of God and make that their focus, you're always one of the first names I mention.
Amazing.
And I have to tell you, there's not a huge bunch of you that I know of anyway. There's some, but not a lot.
True.
Well, I'm hoping that a lot of people listening here and your great advice, salient advice, a timely prophetic advice, I would even say for this moment, I'm hoping more will raise up and that we can raise up more to preach and reach and be sent out and to focus on Scripture. I felt the same thing. I knew the same tension, and I just got up and I think I said something like, everyone's screaming about what's broken in the world. This group thinks it's this group thinks it's this group. I said, but look, we have to look to the brokenness in our own hearts that occasioned Jesus being broken for us. And if we'll look to him who was broken for us, he can heal us broken, and then we can be a part of healing.
Yeah.
And then it was like, all right, well, let's turn in our Bibles to the book of Philippians. It's just like you said, that's actually sitting around talking about it, which there's a time and a place for hearing and conversation for sure. But ultimately, we have to look to the book that gives us the answers, and it's God's word.
Well, and people don't come to church to hear what you think about what's going on in the social department. They come for you to preach. They want to hear a good word from the Lord. Chuck Swindoll says, if you go to church and you're not nourished up in the good word of the Lord, you've missed the opportunity.
There you go.
And people come to church. They want to be nourished up in the good word of the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do every time I go. I want to bring the word of God and bring encouragement to them.
Amen.
And that's what you do too.
Thank you for your kind words. That means more than I can say. I mean, I remember I told you this story, but I mean, just as a young pastor, watching your messages, because I love the way you teach the Bible, you get into it, you understand, like when you've listened to a Dr. Jeremiah sermon or your study Bible or any of these things, you're going to understand the text, you're going to understand the context, but you do this exactly what was spoken over you. You speak it to your generation. I don't think there's a better storyteller, which I want to ask you about, because it's like, oh, now I'm talking about John Krakauer on Mount Everest. Now it's the guy, oldest man in the world, having his birthday during COVID. Like, your stories that illustrate the text, I don't know there's a better illustrator out there other than Jesus, the prodigal son and the tares and the wheat, all that, but you just do a masterful job bringing it to life. So where do you find all these stories?
Well, let me just tell you why I do that, first of all. Partly because when I grew up, my dad was a preacher, and he told stories, and I remembered his stories. I didn't remember much of his sermons, but I remembered his stories. And when I first started writing, I was writing more just sort of, here's what the text says. And I realized that it was going over the head of some people. N.T. Wright in one of his books says there's two thresholds in your life when you become a Christian and when you go to heaven. He said, unfortunately, most people have no clue what to do between those two thresholds.
Wow.
And that the greatest separation for Christians isn't what they know and what they don't know. It's what they know and don't know how to do.
Gosh.
I think when I first got out of seminary, I was more into interpretation. And as I've gotten older, I've realized we don't have a culture that knows the Bible. So you have to be much better at application, and applications where the stories come. I have one guy that works for me. His name is Bo Sager. He played basketball way back when he was coming to our school. And I tease him all the time because he went to a reformed seminary, but I'm getting him straightened out. And
Hilarious.
he comes every day to work, and we've learned where to go and what to read, where the really helpful stories are. I find a lot of them, and he finds a lot of them, and we work together at it. I think one other piece of this puzzle, there's a woman who lives in Barnesville, Oklahoma, who used to be the head of writing for the company that's there in Barnesville, Oklahoma, the giant big box house. She was their writer, and she's a Christian. And somebody said, you should send her something that you've written and get her analysis of it. So I did. And she sent me back a very short little message. And here was her message. David, don't tell them, show them. If you tell them, so many of them are going to miss them, but if you show them, so she taught me how to map out a chapter. And she would take this chapter and she would map it out and she would say, you have 10 stories here, 3 stories here. There's not enough stories here. You're leaving this bare.
A little dry.
And so I learned how to map out a chapter. Then you map out a book. I think, I don't know if it was this one, but one of the last books I did had 103 stories in it.
Yeah, this one's got to be just about up there, yeah.
That's what makes people want to keep reading.
Yeah.
And, 36% of the people who start a book, Levi, don't finish it. 36% don't finish it. They read one chapter or then they don't finish it.
Yeah.
You got to figure out a way to keep them coming and so you have the opportunity to teach.
So true.
Now, I've listened to a lot of great authors preach and found it not riveting. And I've also read books by a lot of excellent orators who don't write well. But you are a unique bird in that you do both dynamically. Is there, of the two of them, one that you find more challenging and one more fulfilling? Or are you just straight 50-50? How would you rank yourself, like enjoyment and effort?
I started out as a preacher, and that's what I love to do. I find the thing about preaching is you get instant feedback. You don't have to wait till the book comes out. You
Totally.
look at the faces of the people, and writing's hard work. I mean, nobody can tell you anything. If you've written as you have, it's hard work. And my wife is always very relieved when my book is finished. I usually start writing at this time of the year, and I have to turn it in July or August. So I work really hard over a period of about 6 or 7 months. And then I won't let them talk to me about it till after Christmas because you just get burned out doing it. But I love them both. And here's what I hope, and maybe you were saying that. I want people to hear my voice in the words of the book. As I write, I want them to hear my voice. I don't want my books to be so different from my messages that it looks like two different people.
It's true. That's true. I was saying that, but I will say this. I've read books from pastors that the book comes across as a transcribed sermon. And a good sermon does not a book make.
No, it does not.
So
You're
you do come
right.
across very well. But the difference to me is when you preach in front of a crowd, you're trying to hit it on everybody at the same time.
Right.
Like a plumber, the mom. Whereas when you read a book, you want it to be very intimate. And I feel like you write in a way that's very intimate. It feels like you're writing with just one person in mind.
Yeah.
Well, I actually had a guy do a doctoral thesis on the way I preach, which was pretty daunting.
Whoa.
I had to sit down and read this book on what he thought about my preaching. It was really interesting to have somebody else look at how I do what I do. I've never had anybody do that with any books. And I'm learning all the time about books. And the craft has changed. I mean, it's not the same as it was when I started. I couldn't do now what I did then and have it be successful.
What's the biggest difference?
Well, I think you've hit on it. You have to build a bridge between what you know and what you want them to know, and that has to be done with the right story. I know that you know this guy. He's a master, and that's Mark Batterson. Do you know Mark Batterson?
We don't know each other personally. I know of him, obviously.
Well, he's an incredible writer. I admire him so much.
He's very good.
I have to be careful that when I read his books because I want to quote him all the time, and I can't do that. But he just came out with a new book called Win the Day. And I saw him on TBN last night. He was talking about this new book. And his books do, in many respects, what I've tried to learn how to do. They're very interesting, but they're very biblical. And if interesting and biblical isn't always true. I mean, I know a lot of guys who've got PhDs and they can tell you what the Hebrew means, but it's not very interesting and you get lost. So being totally biblical and totally interesting, that's what I try to do.
You achieve that balance very well.
Sometimes they're like this against each other, but
Yeah, that's very good. Now, when you are not working, when you're on one of your pretend like you're retired moments, what do you and Donna like to do? What brings you joy?
Well, we like to cruise, that's for sure. We've probably done 50 cruises in our life because we
Wow.
take people all these, and we're hoping we can get to do it again in July because we have like 500 people signed up to go to Alaska. And I hope we can do it because we love doing that.
Do you enjoy Alaska better than a
I
Caribbean
love
type
Alaska.
destination?
I've been going to Alaska in August. In fact, I have my grandson, David Todd, who's now a seminary student at Liberty. When he was 3 years old, we started going to Alaska, and David and I got our picture taken on a swing outside of a lodge there every year, and I can watch him grow up on this swing. I took all these pictures, and every year we made sure we got our picture taken at the same place. So he grew up, and he's been there so many times. And there's something about Alaska. I tell people, it hasn't been spoiled yet. You know, it's still God pristine, and it's wonderful, and there's refreshment there. I love going there.
Wow.
If Donna were here and she were honest, she would say, my wife is a wonderful decorator. She loves to, she's told me this week she's going to work on a room that we needs some help, and she loves to shop. And we have a lot of fun. My secretary is so into this that when I go on a trip, and I do a lot of traveling and trips, she gives me my itinerary, and the last 2 pages are the closest shopping center and all the stores that are in the shopping center. So my wife will know what's going on. And
That's amazing.
I've learned to be a good shopper. I hated it at first, but now I have fun doing that because I can see how much. And the problem is she hardly ever buys anything. She just shops.
It's like fishing. They don't call it catching. It's just shop.
There you go.
Hey, I know a lot of men who wish their wives had the spiritual gift of going to a mall and not buying too much. So I would count yourself highly lucky there. But,
well, I'll tell you what. She's got one favorite store, and it's Dillard's. And
Gotcha.
there's no Dillard's out here. So when we go back there, you got to find Dillard's, or you don't get a good grade.
That's hilarious. And then how about hobbies? Do you have hobbies that replenish you besides writing books and?
Well, I have a friend who's a trainer. His name is Todd Durkin. I write about him a little bit in that book and other books. In fact, he was just in chapel yesterday where you were.
Oh, yeah.
He was just in chapel. Gave a great message on mentoring, what it means to have a mentor and to be a mentor. Anyway, he's my really good friend. He trained Drew Brees and a lot of other athletes.
Oh, casual. Yeah. I said casual.
Yeah, and he's a world-class. And I've been his friend now for several years, and I got him, and he started to speak a little bit, and now he's like a doggone preacher. He was here yesterday,
awesome.
And the title of his message was, "How am I doing, Coach?"
Very
so
good.
on the way home, he calls me up and he goes, "How am I doing, Coach?" I said, "Man, you killed it today. You killed it." I said, "Every time you come, you're better." And I watch him, and when I go up there, he works me really hard, and I suppose I work harder than a lot of guys my age, but I love going up there. I told him the other day, I said, "Todd, if I never even did one exercise, I'd come up here and sit in your gym just to pick up the excitement and the positive motivation because it's such a tremendous place." That's my favorite thing that I do that has really nothing to do with my work.
Yeah, but I think to stay healthy seems like that's the reason you're charging at 80 though, you know?
That's important.
What are you doing? Weights? Are you doing cardio?
Well, I do all of it. I usually start on the treadmill for a few minutes. He's got a famous story that he told again yesterday. I was up there one day on the treadmill. He usually comes over and talks to me while I'm warming up. And I was in there one day, and all of a sudden I started going faster and faster, and I was almost like running. I looked over, and he accidentally had his elbow on the speed button.
Stop.
No. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And he
giving you a
was
stress test. You didn't even know about it.
No. So the next day I came in there and I said, "Todd, I learned a lot yesterday." And he said, "What's that?" I said, "Everybody needs somebody to lean on their speed button once in a while."
Wow. Hey, preach that.
So he put that in his book.
Yeah, come on.
Oh my gosh.
And it's one of his favorite stories.
It's a great story.
He's my friend outside of the church in the sense. I just got a field box seats for the San Diego Padres. I've always had seats, but now man, I'm down where the action is because they're going to be really good this year. They got a whole bunch of new players. And so we love baseball and we'll go there. And,
will your wife go with you to the games?
Oh my goodness. Yes. She loves as much as I do.
Hmm.
And now we can call on the way and say, hey, we're coming tonight and there'll be food there waiting for you. So you don't have to worry about dinner.
Hello.
So,
That's great.
we're doing stuff like that. And we love being with our grandchildren.
You got 12 grandchildren.
12 grandchildren.
Wow.
3 of them are students at Liberty University.
I just did the convocation there a few months back. I wonder if they were there then.
Oh, sure they were.
Oh, wonderful.
I asked them if they knew you, and they said, yeah, he was in chapel. Yeah, they know you.
That's
They did it in the
awesome.
football stadium, but they spread everyone out. It was so eerie to see in like a 10,000 seat stadium with 3,000 college students every 6 feet apart with masks on. It was beautiful though.
Well, they're back, and they had to go back a week early to kind of quarantine. But school starts there on Monday, but my kids have been back there for a week, and my son David and his wife took their oldest daughter back because she had to move to a new place, and they're going to help her do that. So I love our grandchildren, and we spend a lot of time with them. They're all within distance. And my son Daniel is on the NFL Network, so I talk to him every day, and I always have the inside story on who's going to coach where and what happened and who's getting traded, and it's so much fun. I just love that. Because I love sports, and he's like right at the center of it.
Yeah, right.
Gosh, what a joy.
Now, I love to ask people that are successful, and I consider you successful times 10, both spiritually and just from what God's done through your life, about morning routines. Do you have a certain routine you like to do every morning? Are you an early riser? Is there what's kind of the sequence once your eyes open and you're awake?
I have to tell you, my routine has changed a little bit during the pandemic. I used to get up and get out of the house, get up and get out of the house and get to my office. And there I would do the things that I would normally do. But, I'm sure maybe this hasn't been true for you, but for us, the pandemic's been really a lot harder on Donna than it has been on me. She, like one day she said, hey, you got stuff to do. You go and, you have a schedule and all that, but I want to make sure that I'm not. So I get up in the morning now and I just sit and talk with her for 45 minutes or an hour. I did that this morning. And then I go and do the things that I do. And I found that to be so helpful to me. And I know it means a lot to her too. We talk about the day. We talk about how we're going to, one time we were both feeling so bummed about this. I told her, I said, somebody said there's enough restaurants in San Diego. You could eat lunch in a different restaurant every day for the whole year and never repeat yourself. And I said, let's find out. So every day we went to a different place for lunch, like for 3 months. I mean, you can't do that and you get so heavy you can't get out of bed. But it was really fun because we places we had never been before.
Oh.
And we had 2 or 3 hour lunches. And now we've kind of replaced that with the early morning get up and spend time together, just talking with each other. And we don't have, we don't have children at home. So that's a big difference. We're on the other side of that. So
Yeah.
That's very touching.
That's
first
beautiful.
of all, what a great husband you are. And that's how you are married this many years. I mean, that kind of a 57 years of marriage, that's the kind of wisdom, knowing the pulse on how your spouse is doing and making a small tweak to go out of your way to serve them. That is touching.
Yeah, and
That's really beautiful.
we've learned to be honest. I did something, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I'm just going to tell you, this is a funny thing. One of the things I do, as you know, is I schedule chapel for our school. I call everybody personally and ask them. And people ask me, why do you do that? And I said, well, I have
no one's going to say no to Dr. Jeremiah, first of all.
I have the best shot of making that work.
Right.
So I'm not going to tell you this but I called a guy, somebody told me I should call, and it was really not a good call, a bad call. He was very arrogant and said some things that were really, and when I was all over, I was glad I had the call because I would never want him to come, knowing that he was like that. Some people get so full of themselves, they haven't got any room for anything. And this guy was just over the top. It was just unbelievable.
Wow.
and he dissed me. He made me feel like I wasn't worthy to talk with him,
Oh.
So I was pretty upset about that. And I called Donna on the phone. Now you got to get, this is, the Bible says the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. So I call her on the phone, and I had some calls out to some pretty important people that I was trying to get answers from for my schedule. And I began to talk to her, and I said, hey, I just got a call on the other line. Can I call you right back? And I hung up, and I started to take the other call, and I realized I just did to her what that guy did to me.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, so I didn't call the other guy. I called her up, and I said, hey, did I just do to you what so-and-so did to me? She said, you most certainly did.
Wow. Wow.
I said, honey, I'm so sorry. I got, you get caught up in the moment. And that was a really important lesson for me, because I realized no matter how long you've been married or how long you've been doing relationships together, little things like that can happen. And what I try to do now is arrest them as soon as I see them. And I realized that it wasn't egregious. It wasn't awful, but it was just, I told her, I said, I don't ever want to take another call while you're on the other end of the line, unless it's absolutely something I don't have any choice about. And so, those are the kind of things that happen along the way. You don't ever forget. They're just little funny memories that happen between you.
Yeah. Oh, it's so helpful, though.
It's beautiful.
Arrest those things.
Arrest them early. Catch them early. That's the little foxes, I don't think I've ever heard a better teaching through the Song of Solomon than yours. I went through it. I can remember where I was listening to all of them as a young pastor, trying to make sense of this book. And you just did a masterful job, by the way, that series. I don't know if you plan to revisit it, but you just really brought those scriptures to life in a very practical way, in a very funny way. Some of the stories in there, self-deprecating, but I'll never forget that. And I think, as we've been married now, 16 years?
Almost 17.
17 years, looking forward, going, I want to get to that 57. So to me, it's like, I don't know I wish you would tell me offline who that young guy is so I can go beat him up. But just that to dishonor you, with what God's done through you, that I'm impressed a lot differently than I used to be. I used to be impressed, can you build something big? Can you, whatever. It's like, now I'm looking at your impact, the legacy, the photos of your grandkids. That to me is more impressive than I preached in 20 continents. Not that there are 20 continents, but that you're present with your kids. You're there with your son. I remember you were in New York City and we were texting, and just the way you're with your family. And that to me is worthy of celebration more than, my radio program's heard around the world.
Well, you know what? A lot of guys grow up in Christian homes, and I know a lot of them, they get bitter because their parents sacrificed everything for the ministry and they got left out. And I'm thankful to the Lord that he didn't let us do that. Yeah. I had athletes, and at one time I had a guy playing football on the other side of the country, and I'd get on a plane to go back there and watch him play and get back in time, just get some sleep and preach the next day.
Wow.
And when that was all over, I was really glad it was all over, because it was really hard, but I was never sad. You know what's so much fun is now to watch my children do the same kinds of things with their kids. Like this week, my son and his wife went back to Liberty with their oldest daughter to help her move into her new apartment. They didn't have to do that, but they know, you pick out these things with your kids and you do them, and they become symbolic of your love for them in a way that words won't ever convey. So.
Gosh, well, for that and a million reasons, thank you for giving us a picture of what bullseye looks like on a target called serving God. Not everybody listening is going to end up leading a church, but they're all going to have to choose between their family and whatever other versions of success there are. And you show what it's like to have your ladder leaned up against the right wall. Because what a tragedy to keep climbing and at the end look back and go, I was getting up higher, but it was on the wrong wall. So thank you so very much for that.
Well,
I can't
thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you guys too for what you do, and for how faithful you are. And I told you when you were on our show here not long ago how overwhelmed I was by the story of your daughter. It's a story I'll never forget, and even some of the terminology that you used when you wrote about it. And God has trusted you with some great suffering, because he has some great victories he wants to give you. And I know that we're going to see those coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
I did want to ask about the study Bible because that must have been a Herculean task. I want to mention for those listening, in addition to Forward, the newest book by Dr. Jeremiah, there is, as you've heard, 50 other books, but two that I want to highlight, and that is, of course, the study Bible and the kids' study Bible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which, thank you so much for signing them for Daisy and Clover.
Yeah, you sent
they
them to Daisy
read
and
them
Clover.
every day.
They love them. I'll catch Clover up in her bunk bed, and she's reading her study Bible, and she's just engaging the photos, the
That's
story.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those projects, and specifically all the notes that went into creating a Bible that is that weighty.
Yeah, it was a big challenge. It took 2 years, and I had two guys helping me in our office, plus all the people in the publishing house, and we worked hard at it. And we're getting ready to maybe do a revision of some sort. But now we are in NKJV. We're in the New King James Version. We're in the NIV, and now in the ESV.
Oh, awesome.
And we're kind of plowing through the Mary translations until we get the ones that we know people are reading. And but that was a great project. It really was. And right now I'm working on a master index for all of the helps that are in there, all of the little articles and things, because that's one thing I felt was kind of like missing. And when I get that done, I'm through Second Chronicles, and I got like 15 pages. So it's a lot of material. But when I get that done, I will have pretty much the core of a study Bible, of a book on the Bible, because all of these different notes and things are cross-referenced throughout. When you're looking, for instance, under Jerusalem, there might be 10 things that you would never think of under Jerusalem, but they are about Jerusalem, and they're stuck over here and back here. I'm trying to bring all those together. It's a very tedious project. And I'm getting ready to write another book now, and when you get ready to do that, you got to put all that stuff on hold because you can't do both of them.
Oh gosh.
Wow.
And preach.
Yeah. No, do you take some preaching breaks while you're writing, or do you just keep plowing through?
I take 6 weeks off at the end of the summer in August. At least I have in recent. That's kind of been what I've done. Come back the week after Labor Day. Outside of that, I'm not out of the pulpit very much. I would say for a church our size, I'm probably gone less than most people I know. And that's no, I mean, I'm not getting any award for that. I don't want to be gone. I love preaching to them more than I would ever want to preach to anybody else.
That's amazing.
And we were talking, Todd and I were talking about this yesterday in the gym, and he asked me why I didn't take time off after Donna had her little episode. I said, Todd, if you're a preacher, man, you got to play hurt.
Yeah, totally.
Isn't that true?
Oh my gosh.
You get up when you feel like preaching, you got to preach anyway.
Yeah.
And
a lot of guys I know,
those are some of the most precious moments, aren't there?
Yeah,
Like
you find out when you're weak, God is strong.
Yeah.
And he's a better preacher than you are anyway. So
Man, I remember many times when Levi's either been sick, like literally vomiting in the back room and then getting up to preach and then just preaching an amazing message. Obviously, the message he preached right after our daughter Lenny went to heaven. But yeah, those are some of the most sweetest because you literally feel God's strength in your weakness.
That unction comes upon you in a very different way. And that was a word that I heard early on that's like, and you have to discover it to discover it. It's almost a little
and you know what?
Yeah.
A lot of people think that's the way it is all the time. So they get up with the idea, open your mouth and God will fill it, and they don't study and all that. But that isn't it. You got to be ready to go. And I'm sure there'll be some time, maybe as I get older, where I won't be able to. But right now, I'm not missing much time.
Man.
I'm not letting anybody it's the joy of my week. So why would I give it up?
Right.
I work so hard at a lot of stuff I really don't like to do. Some stuff that's really hard. That's it, man. I don't want to ever not do that.
Wow.
Well, with that, we will let you go. We have taken an hour of your time. This has been gold. I guarantee you,
so
everyone
helpful.
listening is just as blown away as we are. But thank you for your time. Thank you for your life and your friendship. It means a lot to
You're
us.
welcome.
Thank you.
Well, next time you come, I'll be here.
Yeah,
and we'll
clear.
go do that tour we were going to do.
honestly, that restaurant, we had the best time on Coronado Island exploring and having fun. We just were talking about that the other
Thank
day.
you so much for having us. It was really a fun
And
time.
we look forward to dinner with you and Donna when that does work out.
Yeah.
We'll do it next time.
We may even hit you up when we're not coming to preach because we just liked being there. So
I know.
especially with 88-degree days.
Yeah.
You know J.D. Greer?
Oh yeah, he's the president now at the moment, right?
His wife came out here and they stayed over there. You know what she said? She said if Columbus had discovered Coronado, there wouldn't even be an East Coast.
Hilarious. That's exactly right.
That's a great line.
Yeah. So I feel that way too.
Please give our regards to your wife, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank
so much.
you.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening. And be sure to swing by levilusko.com to see what's going on in our world, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. In the meantime, we would love to connect with you on social media. Jennie and Levi Lusko, out.